What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Aha. And we're going to listen to what is technically a remix, but which segues nicely from the demos we've been going through. That is to say, we're going to listen to the Mark Saunders remix of Foot of the Mountain, which is essentially a working version of Paul's original idea for the track Foot of the Mountain. Now, through the Aha film, as well as comments from the Aha family, I've come to have an understanding of the significance and the place in the larger Aha story that this tune occupies, where Paul had an idea for a song about getting away from the city, the grind, and the environment, and finding some measure of solace at the foot of a mountain, and the recuperative or therapeutic qualities that might offer, but which eventually was fused with a song Mags had been writing, which featured lines that, as Paul saw it, were thinly veiled shots at him, and thus the idea of a diss track, so to speak, being merged with a song he felt very strongly about was very objectionable, but the other two guys in the band thought it would be a hit, which I understand it was, but which, for the next few years at least, fractured the band, thankfully not permanently, as it turns out in the end. But yes, this is obviously a notable moment and milestone in the larger Aha story, as I've come to learn. And we're going to hear what was essentially a demo of Paul's version. Now, this was worked on by Mark Saunders, an American producer who I understand, and thank you to Sophia for providing some information here, who worked with Erasure and Ian McCulloch from the Echo and the Bunnymen, but not the producer who worked on the final fused version of the track that became the title song of the album from 2009. So this is from 2008, and it's worked on by a different producer than the one who actually worked on the final mixed version of the track. And my understanding is that Mark Saunders was surprised when this was released as a bonus with the Cast in Steel Deluxe Edition, because he felt like it wasn't fully done and it was still in essentially demo form. And I believe his comment is that it makes Morton seem like not a great singer because they hadn't, repolished or worked on the vocal emphasis or delivery such that it was reflective of Morton's obviously outstanding vocal abilities. So either way, I'm curious to hear what essentially would have been the song had Paul gotten his way and had they continued to work on it and put his version of it on the album. So no more talking, let's listen to it. This is the Mark Saunders remix of Paul's original idea for Foot of the Mountain, which is from 2008, a year before the later rendition of the tune, which again was worked on by a different producer. I'm trying to remember his name in the moment. It's Roland something, I want to say, a German producer. But yes, this is the Mark Saunders remix of Foot of the Mountain. Grit to it.
12th Street looks alright in the dawning light. Everybody's on their way. Everybody's on their way to work. But we could live by the foot of a mountain. We could clear us a yard in the back. Build a home by the foot of the mountain. We could stay there and never come back. We could stay there and never come back.
I do love that.
12th Street looks alright in the dawning light. street looks alright in the dawning light. Everybody's on their way. But we could live by the foot of the mountain. We could make us a wise picket fence. Build a home by the foot of the mountain. We could stay there and never come back. We could stay there and never come back. We could stay there and never come back.
That's awesome. So, it may sound a little less polished, though I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Saunders about Morton's vocals. I think they sound great here. I will say, there was a previous demo where I didn't mention this in my outro, although I think maybe I talked about his vocals going into the red a little bit, but there was one of the demos, multiple folks commented that, like, oh, he sounds like a little off here, and I did hear that. Like, I did get a sense that it wasn't perfectly melodically in the pocket like he often is, though I, of course, in the moment, I'm always inclined to think, was that intentional? Is that, part of the expression of the feeling or the lyrics of the song? But here, there weren't any moments like that where I felt like, oh, it sounds like he's a bit off or he's a bit shrill or whatever. It felt like a more or less quality Morton vocal performance, so I'm a bit amused by the idea that Saunders is like, oh, but we were still working on this, and it's almost like it betrays Morton's vocal work and makes him sound like a crap singer. I don't quite hear that, so maybe people will disagree, but sonically overall, it might sound slightly less polished than the eventual title track of the album Foot of the Mountain, but I think it sounds great. I think, the synth, the keyboard work sounds great. I think the overall energy and percussive rhythm of the song sounds great. There's a gritty sort of bass line at the bottom. So I think all the ingredients sonically are pleasing, and I will say lyrically, thematically, I think it's a more coherent song. Now again, I really enjoy the final version, and this doesn't necessarily tilt my opinion on the Foot of the Mountain incident, if you will, more toward Paul necessarily, but I feel like I absolutely get his idea that, wait, like, it's a coherent song in terms of the sentiment, the mood, like, hey, all this bustling and, people sort of on crowded streets and so on, they'd all like to get out to this mountain, and we could build a house, a home even, at the foot of the mountain and never go back, and maybe that would be a desirable experience, so, or life trajectory. So I feel like lyrically, I get that this is a more self-contained and coherent track, but I don't necessarily see it as better or worse than the final version of the tune. I just feel it would have been a slightly different song. So ultimately, the idea that Mags and Morton were like, hey, this really works the way this producer suggested, what he suggested we try, I completely get that, and I'm very appreciative for the final version of the song that came on the album. But I think this would have been a cracking tune too, the way Paul envisioned it. And even if they would have worked on it more and maybe it would have sounded a bit more polished sonically, I think it's already in a great place. So ultimately, it's a shame what happened over this song. It's wonderful that they eventually worked through that and have now put out multiple more albums since the issue. But ultimately, I don't think it's inherently inferior to the tune we got. I think it is good in its own way, and again, thematically maybe a bit more cohesive. So either way, I enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.